Living dinosaur. For centuries there has been talking of a deadly and violent monster lurking in the waters of Africa, particularly in the Congo River basin. The lakes, rivers, and swampy environments are those most preferred by the monster that has become known as Mokele-Mbembe. In English, it means the one who stops the flow of rivers. It is the aptest name, since the Mokele-Mbembe is said to be around the size of an elephant, and maybe even bigger, and has a long, muscular neck. Although, at a local level the existence of the beast has been known for generations, it was not until 1980 that the rest of the world, thanks to mainstream media sources, got to hear about this mysterious animal and its exploits. It must be said that it sounds not unlike some surviving relic from the Jurassic era, although it probably isn't. It was in that year that Dr. Roy P. Mackal headed off to Africa to try and determine the true nature of the Mokele-Mbembe. It's important to note that Mackal was no amateur. He was a biologist and a biochemist who spent much of his time working at the University of Chicago. Mackal had the very good fortune of interviewing a large number of people who had seen a Mokele-Mbembe or who had heard of it. Having listened carefully to what the witnesses said, and having studied the descriptions of the appearance of the monsters, Mackal came to an astonishing conclusion: the animals were very possibly sauropods. We are talking about huge reptiles that became extinct 65 million years ago when the rule of the dinosaurs on our planet came to a crashing end, possibly as a result of a comet or a massive meteorite slamming into the Earth. 7 years after his trip to Africa, Mackal penned a book on his work, A Living Dinosaur, In Search of Mokele-Mbembe, and a very good read it is. Mackal was not the only person to seek out the truth about the monsters of the Congo. The late J. Richard Greenwell also spent a lot of time trying to resolve the riddle of Mokele-Mbembe. His target was the Likoala River, a place where he stumbled on a number of massive tracks, which suggested the presence of a huge, lumbering beast that spent time in both the water and on land. In 1986, a man named Rory Nugent caught sight of a long-necked animal in the swampy environment, adding further weight to the theory that the Mokele-Mbembe could be sauropods. The strangest part of the story is that Nugent managed to secure a couple of clear photographs of the animal. They could, potentially, have resolved the matter once and for all. Except for one thing, the native people of the area viewed the Mokele-Mbembe as a beast with supernatural overtones attached to it. The result was that they demanded Nugent destroy the film, lest the monster would kill them all. Given the hostility shown to Nugent, he, perhaps wisely, did exactly as he was told. The search for Mokele-Mbembe continues. Richard Freeman, of the Center for Fortean Zoology, traveled to the domain of the monster in 2006. While Freeman believes the creature exists, he strongly suspects it is an unknown type of huge monitor lizard. Imagine a 30-foot-long, ferocious Komodo dragon, and you have an idea of what Freeman has in mind. And, it must be said, the idea that the Mokele-Mbembe are huge monitor lizards makes far more sense than the scenario of still surviving sauropods roaming around the Congo River basin. It may not be quite as exciting as the prospect of uncovering long-extinct beasts. But coming face to face with a 30-foot-long lizard would still be an incredible experience, and, more than likely, a very dangerous and dicey one. Bizarre accounts. The habitat of this creature is deep within the furthest recesses of the steamy swampland and dark jungles of the Congo River basin, in particular an expanse of sprawling isolated wilderness called the Likoala Swamp region. The beast in question truly lives up to its name, larger than an elephant and with a long neck topped by a smallish reptilian head and with stocky short legs, resembling a brontosaurus, and which has been a part of the landscape here for the native tribes since time unremembered. Semi-aquatic in nature, it is rarely seen even by the natives, and although a vegetarian makes for a frightening sight, with a mighty roar that is said to create great fear and dread in all who hear it. A good description of the Mokele-Mbembe can be found in a 1980 issue of Science, within an article called Living Dinosaurs, which reads, "In the swampy jungles of Western Africa, reports persist of an elephant-sized creature with smooth, brownish-gray skin, a long, flexible neck, a very long tail as powerful as a crocodile's, and 3 clawed feet the size of frying pans." Over the past 3 centuries, native pygmies and Western explorers have described how the animals feed on the nut-like fruit of a riverbank plant and keep to the deep pools and subsurface caves of water in this largely unexplored region. Although the tribes and missionaries of this impenetrable swamp had long known of the creature, it was not until the early 1900s that word of its existence reached the Western world. In 1909, the renowned big game hunter Carl Hagenbeck wrote of the creature in his autobiographical work Beasts and Men, in which he told of hearing tales from the natives of a hulking, frightening beast that was described as being half elephant and half dragon. Hagenbeck looked into this phenomenon further, speaking with the naturalist Joseph Menges, who told him that indeed the natives had rich lore of this beast and that he personally believed it to be some kind of dinosaur similar to a brontosaurus. Yet another of Hagenbeck's sources was the German adventurer, filmmaker, and big game hunter Hans Schomburg, who told him that the natives of the area blamed the Mokele-Mbembe for killing all of the hippos at a place called Lake Bangweulu. Another well-publicized account was made in another area in 1913 by the German adventurer and Captain Ludwig Freiherr von Stein zu Lossnitz, who at the time was surveying a region of present-day Cameroon for potential spots for colonies. Natives told him many tales of the Mokele-Mbembe, which were surprisingly consistent across the board from many independent sources, although Lossnitz remained rather skeptical himself at first. This version of Mokele-Mbembe painted it as a vicious force to be reckoned with, an aggressive behemoth that the natives steered well clear of, and he would later write of the mysterious beast. The animal is said to be of a brownish-gray color with smooth skin. Its size is approximately that of an elephant, or at least that of a hippopotamus. It is said to have a long and very flexible neck and only one tooth, but a very long one. Some say it is a horn. A few spoke about a long, muscular tail like that of an alligator. Canoes coming near it are said to be doomed. The animal is said to attack the vessels at once and kill the crews, but without eating the bodies. The creature is said to live in the caves that have been washed out by the river in the clay of its shores at sharp bends. It is said to climb the shores even during the day in search of food, and its diet is entirely vegetable. This feature disagrees with a possible explanation as a myth. The preferred plant was shown to me. It is a kind of liana with large white blossoms, a milky sap, and apple-like fruits. At the Sambo River, I was shown a path said to have been made by this animal in order to get its food. The path was fresh, there were plants of the described type nearby. But since there were too many tracks of elephants, hippos, and other large mammals, it was impossible to make out a particular spoor with any amount of certainty. These accounts, along with other scattered reports from explorers and missionaries in the region of these brontosaurus-like animals roaming the swamps, really captured the public imagination, with the thought of lumbering dinosaurs from ages past wallowing through the mists of this lost world proving to be absolutely irresistible. Many expeditions were launched into the forbidding terrain of this mysterious domain in search of the enigmatic Mokele-Mbembe over the decades, some of them funded by such respected institutions as the Smithsonian, and even the famed cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson made an excursion there in 1932. Sanderson would come across large tracks that the natives explained as being from the creature, and he also spotted something very large disappearing into the water, which he could not explain. In the 1930s, the lore was further fueled by a report from the region's Lake Telly of a tribe of pygmies that had actually managed to kill one of the creatures. According to the tale, two of the Mokele-Mbembe tried to smash through a wall of stakes designed to keep the beasts out and were set upon by fierce, spear-wielding tribesmen. After an epic thrashing battle, they were allegedly able to kill one of them, after which they brought it back to the village and had it cooked and eaten as part of a celebratory feast. The story goes that everyone who ate the meat of this mysterious animal became violently ill and later died. Perhaps the most famous of these expeditions was that of a University of Chicago biologist named Roy Mackal, who ventured to the Likewala swamp region multiple times in the 1980s in order to investigate the stories. Although he would not find any solid physical evidence or see one of the creatures himself, the team did find things like large swaths of broken branches caused by something very large barreling through footprints, and they claimed to have heard the creatures as well. Mackal would bring back numerous native reports of the Mokele-Mbembe, which he compiled into a book entitled Living Dinosaur. Another rather interesting expedition was carried out in 1981 by Herman Regusters, who brought his team to the remote Lake Telly. This particular expedition would come back with quite a bit of supposed evidence of the creatures, such as droppings, a footprint cast, and even an alleged recording of the Mokele-Mbembe's roar, which you can listen to here, although it is pretty inconclusive at best and could be anything. Indeed, the 1980s saw several promising expeditions into the region. In 1980, there was one launched by German adventurer and engineer Herman Regusters and his wife. The couple would claim to have seen the beast on several occasions, both in the water and on land, as well as hearing its roars, and they even produced an alleged photograph of it. In 1983, a zoologist by the name of Marcelin Agnagna led an expedition to Lake Telly and claimed to have seen the creature when it raised its long neck and head out of the water, which he described as being thin and reddish in color, with reptilian oval eyes that stared at him for a time before vanishing beneath the murky depths. Interestingly, the only known video footage of the Mokele-Mbembe was taken at Lake Telly in 1987, when a Japanese film crew was flying over the lake to survey the area. The footage is grainy at best but shows what appears to be a very large animal of some sort moving across the water, with what looks like it could be a head and neck. but which has been criticized as being merely two natives on a canoe. Expeditions and reports of the Mokele-Mbembe have continued on into later years, with some of them proving quite spectacular indeed. One British expedition led by explorer and cryptozoologist William Gibbons in 1992 trekked through a large portion of the region and came back with a photograph of what might be the head of a Mokele-Mbembe taken at Lake Tele. In 1999, there was also a rather incredible report printed in the Sunday Times of London, which claimed that members of the Kabonga tribe had killed one of the creatures, but it is unknown how much veracity this report holds, as nobody was ever presented for scrutiny. Despite all of the expeditions and reports, which continue to this day, there has not been any solid evidence provided for the existence of Mokele-Mbembe, but it remains the most talked about and sought after living dinosaur in Africa. Is it out there or not? Considering the lack of many modern-day sightings, is there even the chance that if it did exist, it has finally gone extinct after all? If Mokele-Mbembe is in fact a real living dinosaur and really exists, then it also has some company, and there are various others said to lurk within the muck and trees here, inhabiting the exact same area, within the remotest, most impenetrable areas of the Congo's Likwala swamp region. One is a large, saurian creature said to prowl Lake Bangweulu, and which the natives called Nsanga. This ferocious beast is described as looking very similar to a crocodile, only much larger, without scales, and with formidable, oversized claws on its feet. The German adventurer, Lieutenant Paul Grotz, claimed in 1911 to have been presented with strips of skin from the creature. A rather more well-known member of this menagerie is called the Emela-ntouka, which literally translates from the local tribal language to elephant killer. It is said to be a massive dinosaur-like reptilian beast that is said to be about the size of a full-grown elephant and takes a stout, tank-like form with an armored body, a ponderous, thick club-like tail, and a prominent and formidable horn protruding from its head, similar to that of a rhinoceros. The creature is supposedly semi-aquatic, spending much of its time lurking hidden within the muddy waters of the swamp and, although a vegetarian, stays true to its name, is storied by local tribes for its explosive aggressiveness, attacking anything that approaches and indeed killing elephants, as well as buffaloes or hippos on occasion with apparent ease, usually while unleashing a reverberating, distinctive growl. Although this mysterious creature has long been known to the native tribes of the region, the wilderness itself is so forbidding and closed off from the rest of the world that it wasn't until the 1930s that stories of the existence of this single-horned killing machine prowling the dim swamps began to come in from outsiders. One of the first mentions of the creature by Western explorers was by the adventurer J. E. Hughes, who wrote of a local tribe along the shores of the Luapula River who had killed one of the beasts, an account buried within an otherwise non-sensationalist 1933 travel book called 18 Years on Lake Bangweulu. Interestingly, another of the creatures was supposedly killed by tribesmen in the early 1930s near a place called Dongu. In 1954, the creature was really propelled into the public consciousness when a former Likwala game inspector named Lucien Blanc wrote about it in an article for the scientific journal Mammalia, saying of it, "The presence of a beast that sometimes disembowels elephants is also known, but it does not seem to be as prevalent there now as in the preceding districts. A specimen was supposed to have been killed 20 years ago at Dongu, but on the left of the Ubangi and in the Belgian Congo. In the 1980s, when Dr. Roy P. Mackle made his way into the hostile wilderness of the Congo looking for the legendary Mokele-Mbembe, he too heard the stories of the Emela-ntouka, which he also included in his famous 1987 book, A Living Dinosaur. Mackle himself believed the creature to be perhaps a surviving relic population of the Centrosaurus, an extinct dinosaur that possessed a large single horn, a theory supported by the legendary cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans, although this cryptid is not said to have the same prominent head ridge that these dinosaurs displayed. Another theory is that the creature is not a dinosaur or even a reptile at all, but rather a new species of semi-aquatic rhinoceros, but given the incredibly remote location and the small number of sightings by outsiders, we will likely never know for sure and, like the Mokele-Mbembe, it may even be extinct once and for all. The Emela-ntouka seems to somewhat physically resemble, in some respects, other supposed living dinosaurs within the uncharted wildernesses of Africa, particularly an immense squat, armored beast covered in bony plates and with a thick tail said to inhabit the jungles of Kenya and called the Maru. Also, roaming the savanna region of Cameroon is a cryptid called the Mubu, which is said to be a buffalo-sized hoofed creature with a thick, muscular body and an imposing array of 6 horns upon its head, which it uses to chase off, and on occasion, even kill elephants. It is uncertain what connection either of these has to the Emela-ntouka, but the passing similarities are interesting. Getting back to the Likwala region of the Republic of Congo, we have yet another apparent living dinosaur to join Mokele-Mbembe and the Emela-ntouka, in this instance, one called the Mbielu-Mbielu, or literally animal with planks growing out of its back. As its name suggests, its main feature is an array of protruding armored ridges running along its back. It is said to be almost completely aquatic in nature, rarely seen out of the water, and villagers of the region in which it is seen say that its back is typically covered with a sheen of green algae. This is rather similar to yet another Congo-dwelling dino called the Nguma-monene, which allegedly takes the form of a massive lizard, or in some accounts, a snake, with intimidating ridges down its back. The Nguma-monene is reported from along a tributary of the Ubangi River called Dongu-Mataba, and one of the most famous sightings by an outsider was made by a pastor, Joseph Ellis, in 1971, who saw it swimming alongside him as he rowed a dugout canoe, and who described it as absolutely gigantic, with a portion of the tail alone measuring the same size as the vessel he was in, with clearly visible diamond-shaped protrusions all along the top. The truly massive creature apparently created a rush of ripples and waves that were enough to threaten to overturn the canoe as it glided past. This creature is also apparently very aggressive and supposedly hates hippos, killing them on sight. Hippos seem to just do that to these dinosaurs. Also from the Democratic Republic of the Congo is an apparent dinosaur that looks more like the terrible Tyrannosaurus Rex, reported from the remote rainforests of a place called the Kasai Valley. The creature in question is most spectacularly known from a report made in 1932 by a Swedish plantation owner named John Johansson, who at the time was traveling through the region with a local guide. At one point during their trek through the mosquito-choked interior jungles, they allegedly came across a rhinoceros going about its business. As they stood looking at the creature, they claimed that an enormous bipedal dinosaur-like monster, estimated at around 43 feet long, came erupting forth from the trees to pounce upon the rhino and kill it, after which it actually began to eat the carcass, apparently unaware that the two startled men were standing there watching it go about its hunt. Johansson would describe it by saying, "It was reddish in color, with blackish-colored stripes. It had a long snout and numerous teeth. The legs were thick. It reminded me of a lion, built for speed." There was another rather intriguing report from that very same year from the same area of what may or may not have been the same creature, which was published in the Rhodesia Herald. In this account, a hunter makes his way to the Kasai Valley with his gun bearer. As they made their way through the jungle, they supposedly came across two large elephants standing in the mist. As the two witnesses surveyed the area, their gaze fell upon what they described as a monster, about 16 yards in length, with a lizard's head and tail. Of course, the hunter did the human thing and fired upon it. "Hey, if you don't understand it, kill it," and he would say. What happened next? I was shaken by the hunting fever. My teeth rattled with fear. 3 times I snapped, only one attempt came out well. Suddenly, the monster vanished, with a remarkably rapid movement. It took me some time to recover. Alongside me, the boy prayed and cried. I lifted him up, pushed him along, and made him follow me home. On the way, we had to cross a big swamp. Progress was slow because my limbs were still half paralyzed with fear. There in the swamp, the huge lizard appeared once more, tearing lumps from a dead rhino. It was covered in ooze. I was only about 25 yards away. It was simply terrifying. The boy had taken French leave, carrying the rifle with him. At first I was careful not to stir, then I thought of my camera. I could hear the crunching of rhino bones in the lizard's mouth. Just as I clicked, it jumped into deep water. The experience was too much for my nervous system. Completely exhausted, I sank down behind the bush that had given me shelter. Blackness reigned before my eyes. The animal's phenomenally rapid motion was the most awe-inspiring thing I had ever seen. Stories of similar creatures have been told in the region, but the credibility of the so-called Kasai Rex has been the subject of some skepticism. One of the main things that have detracted greatly from its veracity is 2 photographs of the alleged creature, both of which were found to be doctored hoaxes. There is also the inconvenient fact that the natives of the region don't seem to have any knowledge of this particular creature, and it has mostly only been cited by outsiders, making the reports all the more questionable. Whether they are real or not, they are interesting accounts nonetheless. Other areas of Africa are not without their own stories of roving dinosaurian monsters. Cameroon, which is also thought to be a haunt of the Mokele-Mbembe and others, also has a monster of supposedly truly epic proportions known locally as the Nguma-monene. This creature is said to be truly gargantuan, with its head alone described as being the size of a full-grown hippo. The Nguma-monene is described as being jet black in color and has a flattened head that is reminiscent of that of a seal. The creature is known for its rumbling, gurgling roar, and it is said to kill hippos but not eat them. Hippos just can't catch a break here. Cameroon is also purportedly home to what is called the Jago-Nini and the Imali, which are said to be immense aquatic dinosaurs that glide through the rivers here, oddly not killing hippos. The adventurer and ivory trader Alfred Aloysius Smith wrote of these mysterious creatures thus: And there are things living behind Cameroon that we don't know about. I could have made books about many things. The Jago-Nini, they say, is still in the swamps and rivers. Giant diver is what it means. Out of the water and devours people. Old men will tell you what their grandfathers saw, but they still believe it's there. Same as the Amali, I've always taken it to be. I've seen Amali's footprint. It is about the size of a good frying pan in circumference and has 3 claws instead of 5. Perhaps one of the strangest living dinosaurs of all is one supposedly native to the wilds of Sudan, in the wetlands of Bahr el Zerf, as well as in Sudan's Lake No, and in Lake Victoria. The creature is called the Lao, and it is said to look like a donkey with flippers, possesses bizarre tentacles on its face, and measures up to 100 feet in length. It is said to emit a truly terrifying roar that sounds like the thundering of elephants. There have been many reports of the creature since the 1800s, and in 1914 there was a Lao allegedly killed in the swamps of Adder, but the body was never recovered. In 1924, a supposed vertebra from one of the beasts was received by a British officer from a native tribesman, but where it went is anyone's guess, and we are left with no physical evidence at all. It is rather frustrating because that is the situation we are left with in all of these cases, a lack of any clear evidence and only these mystifying stories and native accounts to go by. It is certainly not an indication that these creatures cannot exist, and the terrain itself makes it a given that these places should be unexplored. After all, we are dealing with some of the most unexplored places on the planet, walls of a nearly impassable jungle filled with diseases, dangerous wildlife, and often war-torn areas patrolled by nefarious bands of cutthroats, all conspiring with the extremely vast areas involved, meaning that it is very difficult to mount thorough expeditions and investigations into the matter. The reliance on reports from natives is also not a damning thing, as many well-known animals, such as the gorilla and the okapi, got their start in tribal reports that at the time seemed every bit as outlandish. In the end, we are left with the question of whether any of these creatures are real, and if so, are they indeed living dinosaurs? It's impossible to say, but if dinosaurs are still roaming the earth, these dark, uncharted jungles are right where one would expect them to be.